one of the biggest things that makes us kind of face palm is when you'll have an artist that'll come to you and go, I really want you to work this record. I've got a budget and we want you to do this campaign. We put the record out 4 months ago, and it's like, well, what do you want us to do? It's out, and I think once again, it's not necessarily a music PR rule, it's a life rule, but you only have that opportunity to make a first impression once.
Yep.
And you've got to make sure that your ducks are all lined up in a row and that you're asking questions of people that you know the answer to.
Welcome to the Music Business Facts Podcast, where successful music industry experts share their industry secrets that will help you take your music career to the next level.
G'day everybody, Rodney Holder here, and thank you so much for joining me on Music Business Facts. If you're a regular listener of the show, welcome back, and if you're a new listener to the show, then this is the podcast where I interview a variety of music business professionals and attempt to uncover the truths of what it's like to be a success or a professional in the music business. And today's episode is all about publicity and PR, an incredibly important element of communicating your music or your music business to the wider community. And my guest today is Mr. Stephen Green from SGC Media. And Stephen is a bit of a superstar in the music business part of the world here in Queensland, Australia. He's the managing director of SGC Media Group, which umbrellas music marketing companies SGC, Title Track, Music Send and Collision Course. And on the note with Collision Course, I've done a great interview also with Mr. Tim Price from Collision Course, which you could go and check out over at my site at musicbusinessfacts.com. I'll also put that in the show notes, that interview. Anyhow, Stephen's groups bring radio, TV, print, online and socials together to offer forward-thinking strategies and execution for labels and artists. And Stephen also sits on the board of QMusic and is a Music Australia councilor and is a previous programmer of Australia's largest music business conference, BIGSOUND. He's worked in the music marketing business for over 15 years, and his roster has included acts like John Butler Trio, Triple J Hottest 100, The Waifs, San Cisco, The Beautiful Girls, Russell Morris, The Ten Tenors, Dead Letter Circus, 12 Foot Ninja, Shepherd, The Butterfly Effect, Abby May, Mia Dyson, Sticky Fingers, Pete Murray, and many, many more. Certainly has a lot of credentials to be talking about publicity and PR. And like I mentioned, he's a very busy guy with a lot of awesome industry connections, which is exactly what you need to be a good publicist. So no matter what business interest you may have in the music industry, publicity and PR are always going to play an incredibly important role in the success of your business. And one of the biggest mistakes I often see young musicians or young music entrepreneurs like concert promoters or managers or agents make is that they often work so hard on their business or work so hard on creating their product that they just launch it and shove it out there when it's done without really thinking too hard about the strategy behind it. They think that their shit is so great that it's going to gather its own momentum and everyone will discover it. Well, that's not usually how it rolls, guys, and sure, you might be lucky, but without a plan, without a strategy, without significant publicity, it is highly unlikely that you will obtain the attention that you're looking for. And a huge part of potentially gaining that attention is often employing the services of a good publicist. Now, if you're listening to this and you've got the thought that you might like to become a publicist, there's also a ton of great information in this interview as well. It's absolutely going to educate you in the world of music publicity. In fact, just the other day I was speaking with one of my music business diploma students who was considering publicity as a career after their studies, and I played him this exact interview and bang, he made up his mind. He said, yep, that's exactly what I want to do. So Stephen having a very influential impact on the young music business minds of the future. Anyhow, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Stephen Green, Managing Director of SGC Media. I hope you enjoy it. Well, I'm here today with Mr. Stephen Green from SGC Media, and Stephen is a publicist. Is that right, Stephen?
Correct.
So the first question is, can you just, for anyone who maybe doesn't really know, what exactly does a publicist do?
Essentially, we work with artists and labels a publicist doesn't necessarily work with artists and labels, but a music publicist certainly does. We essentially work to put together plans to use the media to the best of our abilities to essentially get the word out there about songs and bands and get airplay, get stories written in newspapers, get posts of songs online, get TV appearances, all that kind of thing. So I guess the idea is to put together the pieces of the media puzzle in the best way that we can, and that's different for every artist. Sometimes it's about getting as much media as you possibly can in whoever will take it. Sometimes it's about figuring out where the best places are for a limited time schedule, but essentially it's about finding the audience that the band wants to find.
Okay, well, I want to get into all that stuff, and I really want to try and pick your brain and get as much as out of you as I can for the listeners. But the question I'm curious is, how did you get into this? How did you become a publicist?
I started working in a record store when I was in high school, and I kind of, at that point, we had a few local bands that would put their records in on consignment, and I couldn't for the life of me work out why they weren't selling lots of records, and yet Aqua was selling a hell of a lot of records. And it kind of
Barbie Girl is a good song.
That absolutely, I don't deny that. But yeah, it kind of got me curious about the process of what goes into the difference between a record that's recorded and doesn't go anywhere versus a record that everyone knows and your mum's tapping along to on the way to work in her car, kind of thing. And I guess it was just a morbid fascination that drew me into it. I started doing CD reviews and things like that for newspapers around that same time, and eventually got offered a marketing job at a local indie label that was in hindsight on its last legs, and that's why you'd hire a kid with zero experience as your head of marketing. But it was a great opportunity to jump in the deep end, and the longer I went along and the more experience I got, the more fascinated with what I was doing I got. And when that label went under, I kind of started doing independent PR for bands, and that was 15 years ago, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still learning heaps every day. I'm still fascinated by the whole process, and I guess it's like anything in life. When you know it all, it's time to quit, and I don't know it all yet, so still working.
Oh, that's good to hear, because there's always something to learn, particularly as the industry is changing so much. I'm just curious. So you've started your own little company here, SGC Media. It's you've got a great reputation. Was it a big leap of faith to go out and to do that in what seems to be quite a competitive business?
It was really easy. It's about being 18 and thinking that you're bulletproof and that you're awesome and that nobody can touch you, so you just go out and do it. I think if I'd decided to go out on my own now, I probably wouldn't do it. I'd be way more risk averse, and I'd knowing what I know now about how things work and the way that how much that I had to learn back then, I would probably see it as a mountain that was too hard to climb, and I might not do it. But at the time, I was young and stupid and didn't know any better, so I went, hell yeah, I'm awesome, of course I can do it, and I just did it. And sometimes in life that's not a bad thing to do either.
That whole notion of if you want to be, do, huh?
Yeah, totally. It wasn't even really a choice. I mean, at the end of the day, if I look at it, in the cold light of day, I was actually offered a job at a label, at a major label at the time, after the indie that I was working for folded, and I looked at what I thought I knew at the time, and then I looked at what they wanted me to do, which was essentially make coffee and be a glorified receptionist doing mail outs, and I thought I could do better on my own and use some of the radio contacts and the journalists and things that I knew from doing it on a small level. Jumping into a large label would have meant throwing those contacts out and starting from the bottom again. And at the time I had all of 9 months experience in the job and thought that well, I know it all, so yeah. Very good.
Is it a good business to be in? Like, people say, the music industry, it's crap, there's no money in it, artists have no money, the labels are paying bugger all. I mean, is it a good business, or is it just you're so passionate about it that you've just kind of settled for this, or how's that work?
it's a terrible business if you're looking at it from a money perspective. I mean, I don't know. I don't know of any company in the music industry aside from maybe, Splendor in the Grass or, I can't think of any company that's killing it and making a whole ton of money. Everything from independent publicity is difficult at the moment because artists and labels aren't making any money and they're our clients. So if what you're selling is not selling records for your clients, then they're going to try and push your prices down or not do any at all. So it's a very tough, business in that regard. But in every facet of the industry, I mean, the Warner's annual results came out recently, and they were celebrating because they only lost, $25 million for the quarter. That's. I don't know if that wouldn't be a celebration for our business, but there's. It depends on how sort of glass half full or glass half empty you are, and I'm not old, but old enough to have, been working in retail through high school and things like that when, we'd have lavish record company parties and you had, at that point, I think 7 major labels with offices in Brisbane with 12 staff in each one. There was a real industry, there was a real vibe. Music was a real thing, and I guess we're in a very, very different state of affairs now. But I think the fundamental for me is that regardless of what happens to the music business, there's always going to be music. And I think we've come through a decade that's been really tough in terms of business model and, the downloads replacing CDs, subscriptions now replacing downloads. There's all kinds of structural issues that the industry's got, but I keep coming back to the idea that, there's a lot of people much smarter than me in a lot of businesses with a lot more to risk than me, doing a lot more R&D than me, trying to figure out these business model problems. And if you look at you look at the subscription services, which I'm kind of positive about because I have no choice. Mm-hmm. Certainly on paper, those have the ability in the longer term to return more money to music than what we had in the height of the CD boom. And I think the fundamental is that mining works because you're selling coal, and there might be a downturn in coal at some point, but you're still going to sell some coal later on because people genuinely need electricity. Whereas music's kind of the same in that you can't just shut down and go, well, we're not going to have any music now. Like it's almost a necessity, like water or air or whatever. And there's going to be a way that emerges from all of this that values music and that that I guess puts a price on it that makes it a viable business. And it might, we're probably not going to be returning to the days of having 12 people in 7 major labels all working out of Brisbane. That's not going to happen. But there will be viable business models where where music can thrive. And I'm I think at this point in the cycle, if we can hold in there and run a viable business that has that's rooted in the fundamentals of marketing and and has good ethics and has a good name and makes sure that we don't screw people over for a quick buck, then in the long term we're in a good position for when and if things improve that we're at the forefront of it and that we can take advantage then.
Yeah, awesome. I really like that because if you look historically, how people freaked out about, various technologies interrupting the music business over the last sort of 100-odd years, they really freaked out about when vinyl came in and, they thought that was going to disrupt the live scene that was happening back then. And then radio, everyone thought, well, no one's going to buy records anymore because of radio. So like you said, music's not going to go away. And in fact, now with technology at everyone's fingertips on a laptop, anyone can make music. So there's more music on the planet now than there's ever been, which is in turn going to give you, I imagine, more opportunities, and people that maybe want to get into publicity more opportunities.
Totally, and I think that the challenges that new technology brings as well aren't unique to music. I mean, if we think we got problems, try owning a newspaper right now, or pretty much every industry is being disrupted by the same things that we did, and I think the reason that I love the music business so much, and I guess sticking at it, is that essentially music's ahead of everybody else. We got wiped out 5 years, 10 years almost before everybody else did. So we're leaner, we're meaner, we're stronger. The other industries are essentially looking to music now and going, well, how did they deal with it? And I guess we're still dealing with it, but I almost feel like we've got a bit of a head start on the rest. And I think if we can use that kind of thinking, I think it'd be silly of us to think that we could chuck in the towel with music and go somewhere else for a cushier job, unless we want to go and work at Coles. Then there's going to be these challenges across so many industries, and we might as well face them head on in an industry that we love.
Mm-hmm. So looking around your office here, I mean, am I allowed to mention any of these names? I mean, your roster looks pretty full, or we'll keep that a secret?
Most of those are all right, I think. Actually, not all of them, but yeah.
Well, I'll just say there's some good names on the board of, some very recognisable artists. So you've got some, it looks like you're going okay from an outsider looking in. How do you find your clients? Is it all based around your reputation and your network?
How do I find them? I find them annoying. No. No, we love them all. Definitely most of the business that we get comes from referrals. Mm-hmm. I guess, and by that probably 90+%. We definitely do go looking for things that pop up that we're really into as well. The way the business is structured is that we've got the main, I guess, SGC mothership that does a lot of the more commercial kind of artists. Sarah looks after Title Track, which deals with this kind of indie Triple J kind of stuff. Pricey looks after Collision Course, which is all the heavy metal things. And so I guess we've got kind of people dealing in specific scenes. So often when things are kind of bubbling to the surface, those guys sort of get to know what's there a lot earlier than a lot of other people, and we'll just go chasing it. And if it's something that we really love and are passionate about, they're the projects that we want to be walking in. I mean, I'd rather take less money to take something that I absolutely love into Triple J and passionately, I guess, fight for it, rather than take a whole bunch of money for something that we don't really believe in. And to be frank, we don't do that. So
I was going to ask you that. What's your internal struggle when someone rocks up at your door with a little pile of cash and says, "Can you promote my little band?" and it's an absolute pile of crap? What's the thought process there as a business owner versus someone who knows this is not going to work?
Oh, it's a constant tension. But I think the thing that I've learned, having done it for so many years now, is that the reputational damage of doing something that's a pile of shit will definitely not outweigh the quick $5,000 or whatever it is that you might be taking for that artist at that time. And clearly I'm not here to be a millionaire overnight. I'm here to have a long-term business that is sustainable, and realistically, the better the artists are that you take on, the less good publicist you need to be to get it up. And I think it's one of those things that people forget in the whole process, is that yes, our knowledge of media is really important, our relationships are really important, but we're still talking about a process that will put 25% of awesome on top of what you've already got, and the rest of it's the music. There's no point. We can have the best relationships in the world. We can have the the best systems in the world, and it doesn't matter if the record's not up to scratch. And I mean, you go back to the 70s or the 80s, and I was talking to a very well-known manager, about 12 months ago, and they were sort of saying it was like, go back to the 80s and promo was easy. You'd go slap it on, slap the record on the desk in front of Molly, and then you go slap the record on the desk at 2SM and go to the pub for the rest of the day because your promo was done. Once those two picked it up, the rest of it just took care of itself. Yeah. And, I think certainly, I wasn't around at this point, but certainly in the 70s and 80s and whatever, the relationships were very important. You could get things across the line that otherwise wouldn't or shouldn't get across the line because you did rounds of golf with. I said golf there, could have been other things, but rounds of golf with people, or there was a lot of gifting that was going on and things like that. And
surely that happens today, though.
Not really. I think. I mean. Not to that extent. I mean, certainly it's more of a genuine business relationship now rather than simply being a pay for play kind of thing. And the reality is that we're talking about businesses that have got way more at stake than one music director or one advertising campaign. If everything, particularly if you're talking radio, everything is surveyed down to the last iota of its being at this point, and they know the facts that if you play a song that's not up to scratch, then people will switch across and they'll lose ratings. And if you look at it, half a ratings point drop in a radio survey might mean hundreds of thousands, if not more, of dollars worth of lost revenue for that radio station. Mm. So, the risk of throwing a song on there when the playlist is so tight. I mean, you're talking about, for a commercial radio station, 2 or 3 new songs added to the playlist in a week is actually a really good week. And for some networks, it's even less than that. Now, if you're going to chuck a song in there for a mate, you've almost put half the playlist changes for the week down to a personal relationship. You're going to have bosses that are going to ask you about that. It doesn't actually make sense, and there's no wiggle room there for those sorts of things to go on, and there's always somebody above you you've got to answer to, and unfortunately, the answer, well, he's a good mate of mine and we do golf together, is not an answer that's going to rub. Mm.
Interesting. Stephen, I want to really try and get some strategy out of you now. And the first one I want to come from is from anyone listening to this that's maybe thinking, I really wouldn't mind getting into the music industry and I reckon I'd be a pretty good publicist. So a 2-part question. Is there room for more publicists, and what strategies and advice have you got for anyone that would like to get into music publicity as a career?
No, there's no room. Choose something else. Go away. No, I think the interesting thing about the question is assuming that there are people out there that are passionate about wanting to get into music publicity, and
I know there is because I teach them.
Excellent. But I guess the reason I'm going there is that in my experience, and particularly in the last 10 years, there's a lot of most people that are out there doing publicity or looking to get into publicity are often people that don't want to get into publicity. They want to get into other aspects of the music industry, but because there's no holes there, publicity is kind of seen as the easy way out. So you'll find that there's a lot of managers that are doing publicity on the side, or people that are looking for other things, but PR is kind of a choice that they can grab because it's there. And I think most of those people end up falling by the wayside reasonably quickly, because I think what makes us able to hang in there, and all of the great publicists that I know that really work, publicity and the marketing of music is really in their blood. Mm-hmm. So if you're kind of the sort of person that's looking and going, well, I'm not quite sure, maybe I'm in here because I want event management, or I really want to be a manager, but I'm going to try my hand at publicity or things like that. I think it's reasonably important to see PR and marketing as being just as much a passion a passion project as what a manager is, or an events manager, or whatever. And I think it is actually kind of rare to find those people that the primary goal for them in the music industry is marketing. So yeah, I guess when those people poke their head up, it's reasonably rare, and there's not a lot of paid jobs in it. The problem from a label perspective is that they've let a lot of their PR departments go. Straight up, if you're sitting in Brisbane, then there's nothing here for you. Move to Sydney, except for me, which, I mean, I didn't want to move to Sydney. That's pretty much why I'm sitting here running my own race as well. But, certainly from a label perspective, there's very few jobs in there. Even the major labels, they're lucky if they've got 6 people doing PR internally. Probably a few more, doing plugging and things like that. But, the jobs are very rare. In terms of independent PR, most independent publicists are literally independent publicists. There's probably only maybe half a dozen to a dozen publicists in the whole country that I can think of that hire anybody. And most of those are part-timers, or there's a lot of internships, and I put that in inverted commas, that go on. But there's just not a great deal of opportunity out there. But it's the music industry. It's like telling a band why bother. Why bother being a band? Because there's a whole, there's 40,000 bands out there, and there's only 40 on the top 40. So your chances are bugger all. So why even try? It's the same thing. If PR is really what you want to do, and music PR is particularly what you want to do, then fight for it. And it's going to be a hard fight, but if you're kind of into the marketing side but not that into the music, go do it for a different industry. And if you're into the music but not the PR, figure out something else to do. But if you're really into music PR, then fight for it. Go hassle people and knock on doors. And I think one of my guys that are working for me now, they came through and said, I did my research and I decided that I'm going to come and work for you. I don't have any jobs going, so that's all right. I'm just going to keep turning up until you pay me. And that's the kind of attitude I think you have to have, really, which is it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality, right? Yeah, totally. And then, I was really uncomfortable. I don't really do internships or work experience or things like that, mainly because if you came here to do work experience, I'd probably have you making coffee and stuff, and that's not what you want, and that's not really what I want. But she persisted, and she was like, well, this is what I want to do. And she pretty much just weaseled away into the point where within a month she was getting paid. And, every time I said, okay, well, I can pay you for 2 days, she'd turn up for 3. And it's just, that's the kind of tenacity that I think you need. I hope I haven't now got my phone going to ring hot with people wanting to work. But there's different ways. I mean, it's the same thing as how, when I got my first job in the record store, I single-mindedly decided that is the record store I'm going to work at. And I went in there every week until I had a job. And I said, have you got a job yet? No. You got a job yet? No. You got a job yet? No. Eventually, about 12 or 15 weeks in, they went, oh, for fuck's sake, here, take off that embarrassing T-shirt, put this Triple J one on and stand behind the counter and see how you go. And, that's the kind of, that's just life, I think you mentioned a key word, and I bring it up all the time to my students, and that's tenacity. And, every year I'll get between 30 and 40 students come and study my music business diploma. And I tell them, I say, there's not enough room in this industry for all of you. And the only ones of you who are actually going to make a dent, however small, are the ones that are going to be prepared to do, the type of strategy that you've talked about with that particular person. It's a tough race. It's super competitive, and lots of people want to do it. Well, absolutely, and I guess from a music PR perspective, working with independents, I mean, it's setting you up for the job. I mean, what are the chances that an independent rock band is going to get on a commercial radio station or even on Triple J. The chances are, particularly when it comes to the commercial side of the fence, almost minuscule. You've got to be prepared to get doors slammed in your face a lot. But if you were judging it on rules, then Shepherd should not be on the radio. If you're judging on rules, Dead Letter Circus shouldn't be on Triple M. If you're judging it on rules, we shouldn't have had Gurumul on The Voice. There's so many different things that you've actually got to. You've got to accept the reality of things, but you've got to be prepared to, if you see a crack in the door, to just run for it, if that's really what you want.
If we're accepting the rules, Parkway Drive shouldn't be probably the biggest band in the country.
Totally.
All right, now that's awesome. All right, what I want to do now, Stephen, I want you to really try and help my listeners out, and because a lot of my listeners are in this situation. They're musicians, they're writing songs, they're writing good songs, and they're producing good music. So, first of all, let's start with some of the mistakes you see people make. I always talk about people, they spend all this time, energy, effort on releasing the record, and then they just chuck it out there with no strategy. Do you see that?
Absolutely, we see it a lot. One of the biggest things that makes us kind of facepalm is when you'll have an artist that'll come to you and go, I really want you to work this record. I've got a budget and we want you to do this campaign. We put the record out 4 months ago, and it's like, well, what do you want us to do? It's out, and I think once again, it's not necessarily a music PR rule, it's a life rule, but you only have that opportunity to make a first impression once.
Yep.
And, you've got to make sure that your ducks are all lined up in a row and that you're asking questions of people that you know the answer to. There's no point in taking a record to a radio station unless you know the format, why your record deserves to be played. There's no point in going out there. For example, a lot of bands they'll go out there with a record and then 3 months later book a tour or a launch, and you look at the touch points of what makes something worthwhile of going into a newspaper. It's like, well, they'll want to do a story because you've got a show. They'll want to do a story because you've got some unique angle. They'll want to do a story because your photo is amazing. Mm-hmm. So if you go and pitch that in before you've got your photos properly done, or if you've got a crap photo that you're using, you don't have any shows booked, you haven't thought about what your story is, then the first impression there is, well, there's nothing here for us, and they move on. 3 months later, if you go back with the same band, the mindset is, I know that one, I saw that one 4 months ago. Whereas if you get it all in place, do the pitch at once with the momentum behind you, then that's where things will really start rolling.
Hopefully. So, how long before the record is about to come out and they're thinking about touring, should they come and see you and try and negotiate that relationship? We want to work with you or your company or one of your offsiders. As
early as possible, I guess. I mean, we won't always commit to doing a record until it's done, particularly if there's no history or we don't know what it's going to end up sounding like. But if you've got some demos or something that is really exciting us, then I guess we like to be used as much as the artist wants to use us. And by that I guess I mean, if you want some opinions on what tracks might be the single, or if you want to start planning, well in advance. If there's advertising budgets that we want to look at where it could be spent, all that sort of stuff's best done well in advance. Yep. And even just lead times for various different media. I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be, but if you want to get a review in Rolling Stone, or you want to get a story in, I don't know, Women's Weekly or something like that, you've got to be pitching that stuff 2, sometimes 3 months out. I mean, for some of the longer things like airline magazines or those sorts of things, it can be up to 6 months lead time, which usually counts most projects out. But, the longer you've got, the more you can plan. And you find that different opportunities can pop up that if you're on our radar and we know that you're coming up in 6 months' time, that we can sort of slot you in for things that come that, you know, that might be off the wall, or, you know, if there's promos happening for certain TV networks that we could put it up for, or things like that have a much longer lead time. Yeah, there's absolutely no harm in having something locked in 3 months before you start. And, you know, I mean, a lot of bands sort of get to that point of they'll record the album and expect that it has to be out the next week. And, you know, I think planning is just the moral of the story, I guess.
Like my band, we had our CD launch with no CDs.
Well, that's not as difficult these days when you can sell it digitally as what it might have been earlier. But I mean, that kind of stuff is simple. I mean, you know, if you, I reckon 20-30% of bands are probably in that situation, but
they get very excited, don't they? All right, now the ball of string question, and I know it's a tough one, but I just want you to try and frame it for anyone listening to this that's going, okay, well, this guy's sounding interesting and sounds like he's knowing what he's talking about, and maybe he can help me. What type of budget does an independent band who, you know, they've got the record done, they may be even planning some music videos, and they've got all that sorted, they might have even had a grant, you know, approved. What sort of budget are they looking at for you to successfully take an Australian, say, heavy rock band and give it a really good, decent push? Give me some parameters, Stephen, please.
I guess it is a how long's a piece of string thing, but you know, anywhere from, if you're talking a heavy band, a couple of thousand upwards, there's not really an exact number. We'll often work with bands though in a way that you know, we'll always be the first to kind of go, you know what, you don't actually need us yet. And we'll do that often with even bands that we really like. Yeah, sometimes chucking on Unearthed and doing your first, you know, your first few shows and. Sorry.
That's okay. I've actually got a band I'm working with at the moment, so this is really interesting for me. And again, I'm really trying to squeeze out some strategy for you. But, you know, great band. The music's good. The production's good. The album cover looks good. The music videos haven't been made yet, but I've seen the storyboards, and that's all looking good. You know, they're really going to come out with a decent product.
Yep.
If they were to say to you, like, all right, we've got about $5,000, Stephen, can you help us? Where would you spend that money? And, you know, I want you to just cover the online media, traditional media, anything that you would sort of do. Give us some gold, please.
Sure. I mean, I guess that's a fairly reasonable budget for a new heavy rock band for sure, and that would, you know, involve some advertising dollars within that as well. And I think. Sorry to interrupt you, but
would you spend that advertising dollars where?
Certainly, online is a big, big one at the moment. For particularly. Yeah, we've been doing a lot in terms of banner ads and things like that, but certainly Facebook and things like that is really good return on investment for us at a certain point. I think you got to be careful about spending money. You kind of got to spend the money so that it stokes an organic response rather than expecting that that people are just going to click. If you take a band that that nobody's ever heard of before and you run a Facebook campaign, it's going to be really expensive clicks, because I mean, you think about it yourself. If you are on Facebook and you look down at the ads and you don't recognise who that is, you're not going to click on it. So there's a lot of chicken and egg in the early stages where, we've found that this with a lot of even really successful bands that we work with, is that until you get your name to a certain point, advertising widely is not that effective. But if you can target people who might know who you are, so for example, I don't know, if you let's say you played at the Albany Creek Tavern every Saturday night, then you'd probably get better results from doing a Facebook campaign just to people who like the Albany Creek Tavern, and build outwards from there. And it might be that you are only spending $5 and $10 to reach a very small number of people, but the more targeted you get and building, as you build that fan base out over a period of time, you should be able to build it further and further and further, and I guess work on the fans that you've got. and convert them and their friends before you start to try and convert complete strangers.
Yep.
And, if you're a new band, and I mean, we're talking music here, if they've never heard it, they're not going to love it. So there's very little point in doing print advertising without some sort of name recognition. Once you've got the name recognition, that stuff works great. But if you've got a budget that can go into, if you're the kind of band that is going to work on community radio carts are fantastic because you can actually play the song. People can get a handle on the kind of band that you are. Certainly there's things like YouTube pre-roll advertising and things like that as well. So if you can target, the kinds of bands that you think are going to appeal, and you can run a pre-roll ad with your music in it on that stuff can be quite effective as well. In terms of just sort of free PR, I guess, the best way from a very early standpoint is going online and certainly doing your own PR to start with. There's no harm or disrespect in that. There's plenty of blogs out there that are more than happy and in a lot of cases more happy to get stuff from bands directly as opposed to from labels or whatever. Do a search for bands that sound like your band and target media outlets that have written about them. It's pretty easy. If you, from a global perspective, you go into Hype Machine and type in a band that you think you sound like, and it'll just give you a list of all the posts. So it's a fairly simple process to find out where those places are. Same thing with community radio, things like that. Just Google search shows that might be into what it is that you're doing. And I guess the point at which you'd probably go, okay, you know what, let's pull the trigger and hire a publicist, is when the market's kind of telling you, hey, this is really good. That you need a few stats, I guess, to show that what you're doing from a product perspective is actually on the right track. So if you're if your band's been around for a while, you're not increasing your live audience, you're not really getting that many good reviews to lean on. There's really not that much going on. Then the time is probably not now to go and hire a publicist. The time's probably to go and record something new or keep working on your demos or that sort of thing. Whereas if you've gone out to 100 blogs, all of which usually post your sort of music and none of them do, then you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
if you put it up on Unearthed and nobody's reviewed it, nobody's listening to it, nothing's happened, you might be barking up the wrong tree. Maybe not, but there's so many opportunities online that you should be able to play the numbers game. And if you've sent it to 100 people and you got no responses, either something's wrong with your email or or something's wrong with your music.
Yeah, I see a lot of people that they're so sort of passionate about their music and songwriting, and you're talking about a lot of, I guess, basically, fundamental stuff, but it's fundamental to you because you do it every day. And a lot of these musicians, I imagine, don't have the time or the desire to do it, or they don't think that they can do it to the degree of someone like yourself who does it every day. That's what they're paying for, I imagine. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we've got, like I said, we've got the various divisions there that can look after each genre. We've also got a service called Music Send, which allows particularly bands at that entry level to essentially get press releases and things like that out there and hire a publicist on an hourly rate. So, rather than paying big campaign fees, you can go, look, I've got $500. What will that get me? And we can put something together for that. That makes it a lot less of an investment, and certainly means that in those cases where it literally is, I don't have time to do it myself, let's outsource. We can kind of do that as well.
Stephen, can you buy your way to get in front of people these days? I mean, money talks. Can I say, Stephen, here's a big wad of cash, Richard Kingsmore's got to hear this, or the editor of Rolling Stone's got to hear this, Rod Yates?
Well, you probably don't need to have a big bunch of cash. I mean, I guess on a fundamental level, that is actually our business model, but without the big wad of cash. But yeah, I mean, you can buy your way in terms of they'll listen to it. I mean, you don't have to buy your way in for them to listen to it. I mean, Rod and Richard are both reasonable dudes. They'll generally listen to things. I mean, I like to think, and I do think that they listen to stuff that we bring in because they know that it's been filtered and they know that if we're sending it to them, then they're probably going to like it even if they don't do anything with it.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's the point I guess I was trying to hit, that you guys are like filters. And, when I interviewed Rod Yates, he said, well, we basically, if you send it to Rolling Stone, we're not going to listen to it because it's, they get sent so much. So everyone's vying for his attention. So you're that man that's sort of saying, yeah, this is worth you listening to. Yeah,
totally. And that's kind of where the value lies in it. I mean, I guess the distinction is that, it's not really, that they're not listening to us because there's any financial gain for them in doing it. It's just a way of streamlining their day. Yeah. And, if I guess the difference that we bring is that if it's something that they absolutely had to play or they absolutely had to put in their magazine, they probably already know about it because the hype should have been acting elsewhere that they would just hear about it. I guess what we provide is the ability to kind of, on that lower level, almost step up for things that they probably should hear but haven't sort of quite got there yet. We can kind of give it that extra boost so that they do hear it. But I mean, certainly there's no magic that we can work that makes Richard Kingsmill like your song, or there's no magic that makes Rod Yates go, hey, here's a half-page ad. There's a story. There's, at the end of the day, we can, the only guaranteed coverage that you can get is called advertising.
Yeah. Okay. And for any of my listeners who don't know who those people are, Rod Yates is the editor of Australian Rolling Stone, and Richard Kingsmill is the music, what would you call him?
Director.
Music director of Triple J, which is the largest indie radio station in Australia.
The most powerful man in Australia.
The most powerful man in Australia, as voted by the Australasian Music Industry Directory. Now, look, Stephen, it's been great talking to you. I just want to finish with one last technique that Danny Filth from Cradle to Filth told me, and I thought this is a really good strategy. So he said basically there's so much music out there these days, so many albums, so many records, that what his advice was to do was to get your best song recorded as best as you possibly can, then go and find a really amazing video producer and make the most amazing video you can, and then that becomes the demo. So it's like this completely finished thing that you can take to someone like yourself just to help you get on, out in front of the 1,000 other bands who sound the same as you or as good as you or perhaps better than you. What do you think? What do you think of that strategy?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, we're definitely in a singles market.
Yeah.
I think, albums are really important, particularly for rock, but the thing that's going to turn people's heads initially and the thing that's going to break you through is very rarely going to be an album. It's going to be a song. And once you've got past that hurdle of having, I don't want to say hit song, but having a song that works, once you've cleared that hurdle, then you can go on to an album. And, if that means that you put all your effort into that first single and you really put your best foot forward. I mean, essentially, there's no such thing as an independent music scene. If you go out there to media, you're competing with all the majors. So if you want to be a pop star and your video is not as good as Britney Spears, then you're probably not going to get played because Britney Spears is going to get played. And that's the reality of it. If you're a rock band and you want to get on Triple M and you're not, and your band doesn't sound like it deserves to be between AC/DC and Coldplay, then you're not good enough. Go away and try again. And that's as stark as it is. There's nobody cares whether you're independent or major or signed or Australian or international, or none of that matters. It just matters whether you've got an awesome song, and by extension, I guess an awesome video helps that as well. But it really does come down to the song. And it sounds so cliche because everyone probably sits here on this podcast and goes, oh, it's all about the song. But it really is.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, but I could also debate that, there's a lot of great songwriters out there who you'll never hear of because they had a fantastic publicity machine behind them pushing, an inferior product, but really giving it a big push with a budget and great videos and great artwork and albums, type covers and all that sort of stuff.
Give me an example.
Milli Vanilli. That's the one I always go to. Those guys couldn't even play.
Oh, we're talking the 80s here, or early 90s. Give me a recent example.
Well, okay.
It's harder these days to do that. And I think if you look at, it's very obvious to be able to say, oh, well, what about some bullshit like Bruno Mars or whatever? But in most cases now, songs that work because they might not be your favourite songs, they might not be in your favourite genre, but they're really awesome songs at what they do. It's very rare now that you can get a bad song up because of hype. Even in the old days, you could buy some chart and things like that. But even then, you can only buy chart and buy sort of eyeballs and whatever for a certain time. At some point, the public needs to actually start buying in and buying a record, or listening to a record or whatever. It's particularly in the days of in the world of streaming. The consumer doesn't even care whether it's been on the radio or not. They're gonna listen to what they want to listen to, and they're not going to sit there and listen to crap. I don't buy into the idea that the public are cyborgs that just listen to whatever's fed down their throat. I think people listen to what they want to listen to, and it might to you seem like a sad thing that people choose to listen to Chris Brown. Certainly a sad thing for me, but I'm not going to argue against the quality of the music because people are choosing that.
I went and saw Chris Brown when he played here with Rihanna. He was pretty bad, but that's just my opinion.
No.
But you know what surprised me?
Leave my playing with Rihanna, Chris Brown jokes aside, but...
I just want to add, I'm a metal guy, and Rihanna was amazing. Her band, her drummer, her backing vocalist, the whole thing. I actually left and downloaded the Rihanna album, so that's what an impression had on me, a metal guy. So, it was a really amazing performance. And
I think, absolutely, that stuff's what will work. And I still even, like I said earlier, it's been 15 years or whatever since I've been plugging records, and there's lots of records that I absolutely love, personally, that I wish had done better. But if you look back over the years, there's very few records that I can't, in the cold light of day and in hindsight, understand why it worked or didn't work. There's very few records that I look at and go, if only Richard Kingsmill had played that, this could have been the best band in the country. At the time, I probably thought that. And, as I said earlier, we don't take things on unless I totally think that that it is the next biggest thing and he should add it. But, you look back in hindsight and you go, oh, I was blind to this, or the band broke up 6 months later, so did they have the commitment? Or, the next record stiffed, or the sound wasn't actually really exactly what it needed to be, or the production wasn't up to scratch, or sometimes when something's brand new and you're into it, you're kind of blinded to some of that stuff. But there's very few projects that I look at and go, gee, if only it had been heard by more people. Generally, that it follows that the good stuff will kind of rise.
Yeah. No, look, I tend to agree, Stephen, and on that, we've been talking for 50 minutes, so look, I really want to thank you for your time. I think there's some absolute publicity bombs in there. What's that?
Just disregard everything I said. It's all about the PR. It's all about the marketing. Give us a call with your wallets open.
That's my next question. So if anyone wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best place to connect with you?
Send us an email. I'll Stephen with a PH at sgcmedia.com. I'll always reply. I'll always be honest. If I don't like it, I'll tell you I don't like it. If I think we can work with it, I'll say. But I can't guarantee much, but I can guarantee honesty.
That's a great way to end the show. Well, listen, mate, I again appreciate your time. I know you're a busy dude. We're shaking hands. Wish you all the best of luck for the new year and Christmas, and thanks again, buddy.
Thanks.
Well, there you have it, people. Stephen Green from SGC Media. What a fantastic insight into music publicity and the life of a successful publicist here in Australia. Let me know what you thought of the interview. I always love hearing from you people. Rodney at musicbusinessfacts.com or facebook.com/musicbusinessfacts. And if you'd like a free report that I've created from Stephen's interview, I've created one called Stephen Green's Essential Tips for Publicity Success. And you can download that free report for free over at musicbusinessfacts.com. Just search for Stephen's interview. And by the way, if you'd like to jump on my mailing list, where I'll always be sending you my future free reports, you can sign up again over there at musicbusinessfacts.com. In fact, if you haven't downloaded my free report, you can go to musicbusinessfacts.net/free report, and that'll get you on my mailing list. Okay, now, before I go, I've decided that I'm going to try something completely different and new. Believe it or not, I semi-regularly have people contacting me and thanking me so much for the information I'm curating for you people with the podcast that they actually want to pay me. Now, I know to some people that might sound like bullshit, but it actually is true. And up until now, for the last 96 episodes, I've declined to take any cash. Now, why, you might ask? Well, I guess that I've just felt that I always wanted to keep the podcast free. And I guess I'm lucky enough to have a great position in the music industry where I can, make a decent living and do this podcast as a labour of love. And it is a labour of love. And of course, the podcast is always going to be remaining free. I'm never going to change that. And as I approach episode 100, it is my mission to continue bringing you guys the best content I possibly can with the best music industry people that I can source in order to hopefully help you people with your music careers. But I have had quite a few people ask me, well, why don't you do a crowdfunding thing, or why don't you do a Patreon campaign? And, I have definitely thought about those things, but up until this point, I've just chosen not to. But in the light of what I said before about people, saying, can I pay you for this information? This is so, this is so great, and this information I'm happy to pay for. What I've actually decided to do now is a bit of an experiment, and this is also something that any musician or any other content creator really could do, and that is to not ask for donations, but facilitate the ability for anybody who would like to contribute to the show. And I really just want to do this as a bit of an experiment, like I said, to see what comes of it. I've got no idea whether anyone will care. Everyone will part with their money. So I've decided to be completely transparent with the process too. So that means that if I do make any money with this little experiment, I'm going to let you guys know. I mean, after all, apart from my time to create these episodes, which, like I said, is a labour of love, I do have the podcast hosting to pay. Since about episode 55, I have paid an editor to put the show together for me and to publish it. I also have an assistant who helps me out. So the podcast is costing me money, and I'm not complaining. I'm just sharing that with you as a fact. And so I've decided that I'm going to do this little experiment, and here's the deal. First of all, have you guys heard of paypal.me? If you haven't, you should go and check it out. So go and check out www.paypal.me. Now, this is a platform that I've decided to use to enable any future tips that might come my way. And like I said, what I'm going to do is tell you guys on every episode how this little experiment's going and how I'm going with getting any tips. So what I want to say to you is this. If you enjoy my show, if you like the content that I'm delivering to you as often as I can, and if you feel that my podcast has in any way ever helped you or your music career or your music business, and you'd like to contribute to me continuing to be able to do this, I want you to go and check out www.paypal.me/musicbusinessfacts. And on that link, if you would like to, and I'm not saying that you have to, and definitely, like I said, the show's always going to be free anyway, but if you would like to, you can send me a little tip. And even just $1 would be amazing. I'm a little bit excited to see what comes from this. So, and like I said, stay tuned and I'll let you know how it all goes. So again, that URL is www.paypal.me/musicbusinessfacts. If you feel like giving me a tip, I'll gladly take it. And if you're a musician or a content creator, like I said, why don't you look into doing the same and let me know if you generate any income with that little service. After all, as I'm always discussing with my students and on the podcast and with clients, it's all about multiple income streams. That's where the music business is right now, isn't it? Okay, well, until next time, I'll leave you with today's quote, and this is a cracker from Sir Richard Branson. And Richard Branson said, "Publicity is absolutely critical. A good PR story is infinitely more effective than a front page ad." Okay, guys, well, until next time, that's it from me. Keep slogging away with your goals. As most of us all know, it's going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And like I said, till next time, people, this is Rodney Holder signing off for musicbusinessfacts.com.
You've been listening to the Music Business Facts podcast. For more essential music business tips and information, visit musicbusinessfacts.com.